This episode is supported by NatWest, providing ease of mind when it comes to business payments.
NatWest Pay It, the bank's own payment solution, facilitates customer payments in near real time while allowing companies to track live spending. Need to collect payments without customer account numbers or process refunds without holding on to personal details? Pay It has your business covered.
Pay It connects directly with each customer's bank account using an API, which also allows data to be seamlessly and securely passed onto third parties. That means you can provide the best payment experience on the front end while empowering your back-end staff with the info they need for truly data-driven decision-making.
To find out more, visit payitbynatwest.com/ITPro. That's payitbynatwest.com/ITPro. It's the end of 2024, and in just 5 days' time, we will mark the start of the middle of the decade. As usual at this time of year, we on the ITPro Podcast are looking back not at what happened in the last 12 months, but what didn't. What supposed megatrends have fizzled out? Which businesses made grand promises they couldn't deliver? You're listening to the ITPro Podcast. Hi, I'm Jane McCallion. Welcome to a belated Christmas episode of the podcast. Joining me today are two special guests from the ITPro team, Ross Kelly, News and Analysis Editor, and Bobby Hellard, Reviews Editor. Welcome to the show, guys. Merry Christmas.
Hello, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
So this is normally the episode of the year where Rory and I get together to talk about the year that didn't happen. Unfortunately, he isn't able to join us this week, but I'm glad that I have both of you on board. So let's kick off with something really, really easy. Nuclear power. I suppose at least we're not talking about fusion power, because that is the one that really gets to me. But we had a lot of talk about nuclear this year and the idea of modular power stations and so on from some of the big hyperscalers. Can we go a little bit more into what was promised and what actually happened?
Yeah, so nuclear has become the talk of the town in big tech. Obviously, it has deep ties to AI and data center infrastructure. A lot of the big tech companies are obviously struggling with power demands at the moment. It goes without saying that nuclear seems to be what everyone's hot on at the moment, but there's been a lot of grand claims. There's been a lot of movement in the industry towards nuclear power, especially SMRs, like you mentioned. But so far, it's kind of all pie in the sky. There's a lot of money being thrown around. Microsoft looking to reopen one of the reactors at 3 Mile Island. Oracle wants to directly integrate SMRs within its data center sites. I don't think this is going to be, something we're going to see anytime soon. We're talking about, plans with decades in mind.
Yeah, I was going to say, so I read earlier, and I'll leave a source to this in the show notes, that power stations that came online in 2023 were actually started, they broke ground 10 years before. It takes a long time to build a nuclear power plant. And yes, these are like small modular reactors, but it's still nuclear power. There's still a lot of safety that has to go around it. Or, if you're firing up 3 Mile Island again, or one of the reactors, that's got to be some fairly antiquated infrastructure. At this point, there's going to be some work to do. I mean, it does slightly, I threw some shade already at fusion power, but it makes me wonder if if it's a similar thing, perpetually 5 years on the horizon, or that they are going to rely on AI to solve the problem of the small modular reactors, which they need to power the data centers that are running the AI, all while the energy problem continues.
Yeah, it's like a Russian doll of AI power consumption, infrastructure, AI power. Yeah, you're completely on the money in terms of the timescales we're talking about here, and it's the safety issues. They're obviously a huge consideration. Regulatory oversight and compliance issues around that. We're talking about big tech companies having nuclear reactors embedded within their data centers. There's going to be huge considerations, and there are major implications in terms of public safety, worker safety at these sites. The investment required as well is something I do wonder about. We're talking tens of billions of dollars, and we're talking about individual companies all having their own sort of idea of how they're going to achieve this. AWS, is looking to build data centers adjacent to nuclear sites in Pennsylvania, for example, and having, direct links between the energy sources there. That's raised serious concerns locally in terms of potential price increases for energy for local residents. Microsoft at 3 Mile Island. I mean, we are a very long way off from this.
We are a very long way off, but these are quite extensive plans. Google wants 7 facilities by the end of this decade, so 7 in 5 years. The Microsoft Free Island agreement is a purchasing agreement for 20 years, so that's quite substantial. It's going to take ages, and if it goes wrong, they're stuck into that agreement. So there's loads of problems that could be faced.
I mean, 7 of these in 5 years seems like a crazy promise. I look forward to getting to this episode in 2029 and looking back, I go, hey, do you remember when in 2024 they said they were going to build all those nuclear reactors? Actually, they cracked fusion. No, I'll stop it. But
as a whiff of the metaverse about it is what I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you look at Google, what they're doing with one of the recent podcast episodes are in quantum as well. They might have dual considerations there in terms of infrastructure. So they've got a lot of work to do if they want this by the end of the decade.
I wonder how the people in the parallel universes feel about Google in Universe 1 sapping all their electricity to do quantum parallel computing processes. I mean, you mentioned about local community and increased prices. So that's just like mental to me as well, because you would hope that given the amount of power that nuclear fission releases, you would really hope that they would actually be paying it back a little bit into the local grid rather than just having absolutely rinsed it in recent years.
I think it speaks volumes about their expectations, though.
Yeah.
Or what they anticipate they're going to need in terms of resources and power to run a lot of centres. This is primarily in the US as well. In the UK, I mean, we haven't really had this discussion yet. We've had chatter about data centre infrastructure and its impact on the grid. National Grid chief exec earlier this year said they're going to have to create some kind of super grid, I think was the way they described it, to meet growing demands. But I feel like we're maybe slightly behind the US in terms of a lot of things. It might be an issue that creeps up next year.
I think that this is because, getting slightly off the topic of IT here, in the UK, we have pinned our decarbonisation hopes on renewable energy in the sense of wind, offshore and onshore wind, solar to an extent as well. And so this is an area where you talk about that kind of infrastructure closer to data centers potentially, but ultimately none of that releases the kind of energy that a nuclear reaction does. And that's a wider discussion about where we get our energy from in this country and our energy infrastructure. But that's possibly why it's not really being discussed here, although we're going to have to talk about it at some point, because, as you say, it is a problem and will be a problem in other countries that have either never really invested in their nuclear infrastructure or turned their reactors off. Another thought that occurred to me is, fantastic, you'll bring online all of these reactors that you didn't get round to making actually in 2024 or even breaking ground on. But what happens to the nuclear waste? Assuming they haven't managed to master thorium reactors in the meantime, this is gonna, if they're just standard reactors, yes, they produce less waste than in the past, but they still produce radioactive waste that has to be dealt with somehow.
It's a regulatory minefield, isn't it? There's going to have to be a lot of close collaboration between regulators and these companies once they come online. Again, we're talking about things that are going to be happening years in the future here. We will have to see how that pans out. But I don't for a second think that a company like Microsoft or AWS or Oracle or Google haven't considered this. These are obviously extensive, well thought out plans. These sort of discussions will be going on in the background. They'll be getting fleshed out as we're going along. But
they're going to fire it into space.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we can get Elon Musk involved. I mean, it's all about government efficiency at the moment, isn't it? So, over the next 4 years, so you never know. But again, we're getting into the weeds of things.
I love the idea of nuclear power plants being killed by Google. That would be the ultimate killed by Google.
Moving on to another topic completely, let's talk about Intel. So this is something that didn't happen in the past 12 to 24 months. In March 2023, the company laid out plans to become the dominant player in the AI market by 2025. Now, I think a lot of people probably saw that as fairly ambitious at the time, but as things stand, in December, so this month, 2024, CEO Pat Gelsinger has departed, and they are nowhere near AMD or NVIDIA. So was this ambition just too big?
Absolutely was. I remember Pat Gelsinger coming back 2021, January, because it was one of the slowest sort of news periods, and then suddenly this big shattering news story, prodigal son returns. But if you look at that point there, they were so far behind in production for 10 nanometer process. AMD had caught up really quickly. By the time Intel had got anywhere near developing that, AMD were already on 7 nanometer process. So they'd lost so much ground. And then we're coming out of the pandemic, we're hitting supply chain problems, skills shortages, all these kind of problems that they face. They just couldn't catch up. So when it gets to developing AI, they're just so far behind they can't catch up. So there was just no way Gelsinger would have turned that around.
Yeah. So the ambition was just too big.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a sorry state of affairs, and you have to feel for Pat Gelsinger. I mean, he came back, tried to claw things back for Intel, and I mean, NVIDIA was just completely in the ascendancy at that point. I think a lot of eyes have been on NVIDIA over this period, but like you mentioned, Bobby, AMD has been flying as well. We're obviously on the ground in San Francisco for their Advancing AI conference in October, and they appeared very confident in themselves moving forward, in their ability to extend their lead on Intel, but also to potentially claw things back from NVIDIA. So AMD, you look at their growth in, the data center infrastructure market, that's huge.
Yeah. I was going to say, everybody talks about NVIDIA. They have a very charismatic CEO, Jensen Huang, when he does the reveals of whatever new product they've got, and having seen him speak live as well, he's just so engaging, and I think that is part of it. And also, the company did genuinely make a massive technological breakthrough with the way that they use computing on a GPU. But AMD, when it comes to the data center and supercomputers, AMD has a massive foothold. Of the top 10 supercomputers in the top 500, which is a list of, as it sounds like, the top 500 fastest, most powerful supercomputers, 5 of them use AMD chips, 3 use NVIDIA, and just 1 uses Intel. Now, admittedly, the one that Intel are involved in is Aurora, which is the 3rd most powerful, but still, it's 1 in 10. They have 10% of the market versus AMD with 50% and NVIDIA with 30%. It is hard to make any progress from that point. And to my mind, very hard to then point to any kind of use cases when you're engaging with a company that wants to build some kind of AI infrastructure, whether that is a company that wants to do some private AI or a hyperscaler or colo or whatever, whoever's doing it. it's going to be much easier for, say, AMD to go, we power El Capitan. It's super fast, it does AI. We power Lumi. It's super fast, it's energy efficient, it does AI. For the European Union, it models like a digital twin.
Yeah.
It models a digital twin of the Earth. Intel, it's going to be much harder, and that it becomes sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Bobby, am I right in thinking, though, that some of the AI laptops and desktops that are coming out recently have Intel AI chips in them?
Yeah, there is. It's quite a little battleground of AMD and Intel, and we haven't really seen which one kind of leads the way, because I think, as we've pointed out before, there isn't much to show for these AI laptops, what they can actually do.
Yeah.
But like HP, Lenovo, Dell, they're all kind of using a mixture. You're getting sort of the same laptop with different offerings for a processor. So it's kind of interesting, but it's at the same time also too early to tell what's the best, what's not.
And that sort of those options there, where you're getting certain laptop series that offer an AMD or an Intel option. Again, that presumably will be having an impact on Intel there potentially.
Yeah, but if you're looking at just everyday consumers or even IT professionals who are rolling out AI infrastructure at some point in the near future, maybe AI laptops to be specific, or desktops, they might just be more familiar with Intel as a good chip to have in your endpoints, in your hardware, or your office hardware specifically, not that data centers aren't hardware, than taking a roll of the dice on AMD, which is arguably less, not necessarily less well known, but has slightly less prestige. Or am I talking nonsense? Because they do, of course, have Ryzen.
No, I definitely feel that Intel will benefit simply by the fact it's the oldest and it's been doing it for the longest. But we can't kind of ignore the mess they're kind of in now. Like, what now happens after Gelsinger goes? What direction do they take?
Yeah.
Do those plans change? It will have an impact in some way, but they can kind of rest on that laurel that they are the big name still.
Yeah.
And obviously the search for a new chief exec is ongoing. They have sort of like a co-CEO situation going on in the interim period. I think, realistically, they need someone with, first and foremost, a cool jacket. That has to be the first box ticked.
Right, lads, I'm on my way down to Zara now, and regret to inform you that I'm leaving ITPro to become the CEO of Intel. So speaking of AI, here is another trend that didn't really happen: AI job replacements. So we've heard a lot about how generative AI is going to spell the end of the creative industries, and then actually we started to hear it's going to spell the end of developers, because the machines can do it better than us and quicker than us and more productively and efficiently than human beings. Devs don't really seem to be quaking in their boots at this point.
Yeah, again, it's another one of those kind of pie in the sky sort of predictions that a lot of people have made. And I think when you go back to the start of sort of like the generative AI boom, a lot of people were really worried about this, about the prospect of job losses across multiple roles in multiple industries. Goldman Sachs had a big report out talking about 300 million jobs lost to AI within the space of a decade. We've spoken about this recently, and when you look at a lot of these coding tools that devs are using at the moment, there are big productivity benefits there. They are eking out efficiency, they're saving time, they're able to focus on more rewarding tasks, which is often the big talking point about these tools. But consistency, safety in terms of the code produced, there are still a lot of questions around that.
Yeah, I've spoken to a couple of IT leaders, one very recently, within the past sort of 6 months, another a few years ago. And the one a few years ago was super enthusiastic, chuck some stuff into ChatGPT, get some code back, or maybe not ChatGPT, maybe one of the other alternatives, get the code back. Awesome. And I was like, really? It's like, yeah, I mean, you have to hack away at it and make it like proper, but it does make things faster. I'm like, okay, well, these are two very different stories. It's not
Yeah.
writing the code for you, not really. It's giving you a framework to work with, and then you still have to work on the code to actually get it to go. And similarly, the person I spoke to most recently said that he had a more junior person within their company come to him and say, I've got this code, but it won't work. Could you come and see what the error is? He was like, yeah, sure, fine. Only to discover that it wasn't like he had mistyped something, or there was a small bit missing, or anything like that, some kind of syntactical error. It was that they had just generated it with AI and expected it to work, and it didn't. And ultimately, the way that any of these generative AI programs creates code is the same way that it creates text. It is just probability based on what you think should come next based on the word or phrase that came before. And you're not going to get accuracy like that particularly.
And it's a type of situation where you think, with AI code generation, and we covered something on this in October or September, I believe, around the time actually spent remediating issues. And it's getting to the point with, a lot of developers where the convenience of AI code generation, those productivity benefits are offset by the time just fixing problems created by that. So, yeah, it's interesting what you said around, a junior developer, having to sort of refer to a more senior colleague on what the issue is. When you switch over to the cybersecurity space, this is something that one of our staff writers, Solomon, discussed recently around, the potential reliance on AI tools in the future and how that could actually, have a detrimental impact on broader security teams and people entering the industry and the workforce. How reliant are they going to be if you're going through college, university now, and so much of the sort of industry narrative is around these tools, and you're using them, you're learning how to use them, you get into your first job, and then boom. What's your level of expertise compared to a fresh graduate 10 years ago?
And ultimately, what the person I was speaking to said to this younger colleague was, I am happy to help you out with your work that you have created, but this is not your work.
Well, this isn't really that much different from us and journalism and what we write. We don't want something writing for us. We just want some help with our writing. And I don't think it's that much different from coding. You're building something, you're developing something, and those are skills you've learned, skills you've enhanced. And that will all kind of just go if you're allowing the AI to do it. And for those younger people that come in, they're just going to allow automated text or automated code that they've then got to fix. It's a bit soul destroying, it's a bit boring, not really learning, and those kind of skills will be lost. And we already do have skill shortages. I'm sure coding is the same. That would just get worse if we use AI for everything.
Yeah, definitely around sort of like entry level people. I won't name the publishing group, but there's a publishing group out there earlier this year that got a bit of flack for hiring AI assisted reporters. How are you actually going to learn and refine your trade if you're using AI tools to create content, and then you're essentially a sub-editor for an AI tool? I'm not convinced.
So while we have a New Year's predictions episode coming up next week, while I have both of you, I would still like to hear if you could choose one thing that you think is going to happen in 2025, one trend, then I want to know what one trend, what do you think that would be? Potentially within your respective areas. So, Bobby, I'll come to you in a sec about hardware. Ross, what do you think is going to be sort of the leading theme in news, or a dark horse in terms of a story that's going to break going into the new year?
Agentic AI, it's already here, but you see the cogs turning at a lot of big industry providers, Salesforce, Microsoft. We're going to see a lot of chatter about this in 2025, I think. And the big talking point here is AI assistants and your co-pilots. They're there to support the worker. They're sort of an add-on to your human employee. Agentic AI is going to potentially change the game. You're talking about autonomous agents carrying out tasks on behalf of the human worker, engaging with customers potentially in real time. That's going to be huge. All you need to do is look at the sentiment and the hype in the industry around this already, and I think we're going to be spending, we spent most of this year in 2023 talking about Copilot and AI assistants. Next year, it's all going to be agentic AI.
We are heading inexorably towards the Butlerian jihad. I can only feel that about AI taking the place of humans making decisions. One for the Dune fans out there. Bobby.
So with 2024, we had AI PCs everywhere. And the optimist in me hopes that we get actual features in 2025. But what I actually think will happen is they'll just use NPUs in more devices. So we may start seeing NPU-powered desktops and maybe mini PCs. And that will just start the trend. I know HP are already looking at one, potentially for CES. Yeah, that's basically where we're going to go, is more and more AI-based hardware. Maybe not tablets, unless you count like the Surface Pro, but definitely desktops and mini PCs.
More AI.
More AI.
Yeah. Here's us going, no more AI. Please make the AI stop. By the way, in 2025... Well, on that note, unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. But Ross and Bobby, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.
That was great.
As always, you can find links to all of the topics we've spoken about today in the show notes and even more on our website at ITPro.com. You can also follow us on LinkedIn as well as subscribe to our daily newsletter. Don't forget to subscribe to the ITPro podcast wherever you find podcasts. And if you're enjoying the show, let us know by leaving a rating or a review. Rory and I will be back next week with our special New Year episode. But until then, goodbye.
This episode is supported by NatWest, providing ease of mind when it comes to business payments.
NatWest Pay It, the bank's own payment solution, facilitates customer payments in near real time while allowing companies to track live spending. Need to collect payments without customer account numbers or process refunds without holding on to personal details? Pay It has your business covered.
Pay It connects directly with each customer's bank account using an API, which also allows data to be seamlessly and securely passed onto third parties. That means you can provide the best payment experience on the front end while empowering your back-end staff with the info they need for truly data-driven decision-making.
To find out more, visit payitbynatwest.com/ITPro. That's payitbynatwest.com/ITPro.